Hello again, audience. Let's get right to it. May I invite our second group of panelists on screen to introduce their names, their agencies, and what they do at work. First up, we have Nicholas.
Hi everyone, my name is Nicholas and I'm currently in the Manpower Planning Unit in Human Resource in the Ministry of Education. So I was awarded the Public Service Overseas Merit Scholarship in teaching in 2010, and after that I did a 4-year direct masters at the University College London in the UK from 2010 to 2014. So upon returning, I went through teacher training at the National Institute of Education for a year, and that's where I learned about classroom management and pedagogical skills. So I then went on to teach chemistry and mathematics in Compassville Secondary for about 2.5 years. So currently in my role, a day in my life will look like this. I focus mainly on planning and resourcing policies to meet the manpower needs in schools. So with falling student enrollment and increased demands in other sectors such as healthcare, we need to ensure that our manpower is right-sized to meet the needs in our schools. So in other words, one area that my team looks at is how do we decide on how many teachers each school gets? So this will depend on several factors such as the student profiles and programs that the schools run. So to do this, we handle statistics and data and make data-driven decisions. And this involves engaging with different divisions within MOE to understand their needs and how we can support them. And then we communicate these policies to the stakeholders. So for example, earlier this week, MOE announced plans to enhance the support for education and career guidance and student welfare. So this takes into consideration the growing needs that our students have and how we can ensure that our students and teachers are adequately supported. So I'll be happy to share more about life as a teacher and my current role now later in the sharing. Thank you.
I'm sure the students, teachers, and parents are very excited to hear more. And for the audience, if you're joining from the first session, you'll know this is our second wonderful Joshua. Please join us on screen.
Hi there. I'm happy to be here. I just wanted to say about the social and security sector. All of us have kind of like, this is the group, there's a calling. And it's like there's no higher calling than serving a nation. So you can say I answered the call about 10 years ago, in 2010. Before that, I was in Catholic Junior College. Then I enlisted in the Army in 2010. And I was awarded the President's and SAF scholarship in that year. Went on to study chemistry as a bachelor's in Imperial College in London, and then a master's in the 4th year in King's College doing science and security. If you ask me, when I tell that to people, maybe a lot of people say, can I make bombs? I can tell you I can't, but at least I can stop people who can. I came back, and it's been about 6 years since I've been back, and it's been a tough but really fulfilling 6 years. And I'd say there are 3 kinds of tours that the SAF, or rather the Army guys, would do. The first is the command. We are in command of the unit. The second is, we call it instructional. You teach people, you train, and you teach people how to be good soldiers in different places. And the last one is staff. So broadly speaking, one is like what you see in the movies, the commander. The second is a teacher, but in the field, not a classroom. And the last is a bit like on the crew of a big battleship, you have people helping to steer the direction. Where I am now, I am a mix between the command and staff. I'm an operations officer in a battalion, Army Deployment Force, one of the Army's units that can go anywhere, anytime. So a day in my life I describe it in the number of times I change my uniform. So I'm wearing number 4 now. This one is, but I usually start the day in PT gear, and we have easy jogs in the morning, or sometimes PT to start the day. And then after that, I'll change into this if I need to go to the field. Then after that, I fold it up if I need to go for a meeting. And then at the end of the day, we change out if there's a dinner function for cohesion and events. So it's very varied, and you get challenged quite a bit. And I'd say, if I were asked why would I have joined, I'd say when I was deciding on the JC to go to, I went to Catholic Junior College because I felt, you ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. So the same applied for now when I'm in the service. It's like, ask not what you can do, but what you can do for your country. And so I'm happy to share more about my experiences and glad to be here. Thanks, Gail.
Yes, thank you, Joshua. Thank you for explaining the three groups and for very clearly visualizing what you do. I can 100% see the the uniform changes.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes, very excited to hear more. Next
sure.
up, we have Alicia.
Hi everyone, my name is Elisha. I have a PSC scholarship from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, PSC Foreign Service. So I got that scholarship in 2012. I was also awarded the President's Scholarship in the same year. I did my undergraduate studies at Yale University in the US. I studied global affairs for 4 years. Subsequently, went on to China to do a 1-year master's program in China Studies, but in English. At a outfit called Yanqing Academy, which is part of Peking University. So I studied for 5 years, really maximized what I could under the scholarship, and then went back to Singapore. I'm now in Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I spent about 1.5 years or so covering Indonesia and Singapore, and now I'm in the Singapore High Commission in KL. So actually, I'm calling in from KL, but Zoom calls is all the same anyway. So it's interesting because people's ideas of being in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is that you get to go off jet setting to all these very glamorous places far away. But I covered Indonesia and now I'm in Malaysia. So I've really just been in the neighborhood. I would say as a diplomat based overseas, it's actually very different from anywhere else in the civil service. Obviously, there's a lot of variation in the civil service as well. But my day is very much structured based on how I want it to be structured. So it revolves around meetings that I set up for myself, meeting a variety of different people in Malaysia. So diplomats as well, politicians, people working in government, people at the academic area or who work in think tanks, and just really understanding what their view is of Malaysia. I mean, the benefit of having people based overseas is that you actually really understand what's happening based on what you see and you hear on the ground, as opposed to what you read online and what gets filtered through global news. So it's very self-planned. Obviously, a lot of this has been upended slightly by COVID. Typically, being in Malaysia, we get a very high number of ministerial visits every year. It's just, 45-minute flight. It's very easy. There was in fact one time where a Singapore minister decided to meet his counterpart in the Malaysian VIP terminal in the airport. So he came into Malaysia, didn't even leave immigration to meet his counterpart for meeting, because 45 minutes is like traveling from one end to Singapore to the other, right? By flight. By flight to Malaysia, it's sufficient. So all of that, so much less overseas visits now that COVID has sort of restricted international travel. But still, thankfully in Malaysia, we can still go out with SOPs. And so there's been some slight disruption, but by and large, I'm still able to do what I usually do on a regular basis.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for painting out the picture of what MFA does. We're excited to hear more. And last but not least, we have Huan Ting. Hello.
Hi everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. All right. Hi, my name is Huan Ting. I'm a police force overseas scholar. So
You're in uniform too.
I am in uniform. Yes, I was told to wear uniform to make sure that people know that I'm a police force scholar. Interesting fact is that I actually haven't worn uniform for almost 5 years now. I was awarded my scholarship in 2007. And then I went to Brown University for 4 years. I did a 4-year program in international relations and economics, and then came back, joined the police force in 2011. So actually, it's been almost a decade in service, and I've gone past the age where my scholarship is my bond is due, and I've stayed on, because I find the work meaningful, and it's been a tremendous journey so far. So I say, I haven't been wearing uniform for 5 years because my postings have been so varied. As I started out as an investigation officer, I did 2 years, and then I went on to become a team leader of a neighborhood police center team, leading a team of patrol officers, working the beat, making sure that crime is fought on the ground. And then I became a commanding officer of a neighborhood police center in Clementi. So this is when I really led a team of 120 people, really ensuring the safety and security of Clementi as a neighborhood. So that was very meaningful work for me. And then after that, I stopped wearing uniform. Why? Because I started to head a intelligence unit in the SPF. As it comes with intelligence work, you tend to be a bit more discreet, and I don't want people to know that you're a police officer wherever you go. So that's one thing. But now I've exposed myself, so I can no longer go back to that line of work anymore. And then after about 2 years in that role, I am doing my ministry posting currently. So I'm in the MHA, in the Ministry of Home Affairs, where I have a concurrent role as special assistant to the minister as well as a policy officer. So in my policy officer role, some of the issues I look at include unlicensed money lending, or loan sharking, or along as some people know it better. I also deal with scams. I also deal with cybercrime policy, for example. In addition to that, I think the bulk of my portfolio really is working with the minister as special assistant. So I would say a day in my life is actually a day in his life, because my day revolves around his schedule. When I wake up in the morning, I mean, okay, not when I wake up in the morning, but the day before I go to bed, I really look at his schedule the next day. I make sure that everything that he has on his plate is prepared for. If he has, some meetings, I make sure that all the materials are there. I make sure that I know all the materials very intimately, so that when he asks questions, I can support him. I do research on his speeches and dialogues. I also help him to keep track of work streams, because there's so many things happening in the ministry that, sometimes for a minister it's very hard to keep track. So I help him to sort of prioritize and make sure that the urgent and the more important stuff are dealt with first, and then the less urgent stuff can be dealt with a bit later.
Yeah.
During this period, I think everyone's focus is really on fighting COVID, and it's not different in MHA. So my minister, he pretty much in charge of making sure that the different efforts within the ministry are going along nicely. ICA, SPF, CNB, SCDF, we all play a role in fighting COVID and contributing to national effort, and that's something that I'm also very proud to be involved in as well.
Yeah.
So that's really just a short introduction about myself. Happy to take questions and discussions later.
Excellent. Let me very quickly introduce myself with my peers, because I'm also from the social sector. So again, I'm Gail. My education pathway is that I graduated from Victoria Junior College as well. And then I spent 4 years in the US in Harvard University, studying basically a mix of economics and psychology, which is a very liberal arts thing to do because you can sample many different courses. And then after that, actually in the middle of my college experience, I wanted to study a bit of CS, computer science and data science. And so I went to Spain, like Alicia, also in English, but I learned a lot of Spanish and still miss Spanish food very much. Then after that, my first job in government was in GovTech doing data science. And now I am in the social sector in the Ministry of Social and Family Development, where I work on family policy. So let's jump straight to it, to the first panel question. For this group, we are taking questions for each panelist in turn. And Alicia, you'll kick us off. You did mention earlier that your time as an MFA scholar and staff overseas has been much disrupted by COVID. So tell us more about which parts of your job have been surprising, but also which parts of your job have been really challenging for you.
Actually, I would say that everything about my job has been very interesting and unexpected. I mean, how do you prepare to go overseas and be a diplomat, right? Especially in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, like myself, most people don't spend time covering the country they're eventually posted to. So I spent time learning about Indonesia, handling the Indonesia account, and then eventually went to Malaysia. So there's really a lot that you have to sort of pick up when you're in the country itself. You don't come in equipped with background or having spent time working on the issue. So for me, it was really, everything was pretty surprising. Realizing that I had to engage such a wide variety of people, not just in terms of their backgrounds and experiences, but really in their personalities, even their age. Sometimes I meet people who are 70-something years old, for instance, and I'm 27, I have to think, but I'm 27, he's 70-something years old, and I still have to be able to adapt myself to have a conversation that he finds meaningful and that he can actually feel comfortable in. So there's a whole range of people that you meet. If it was a social interaction with your friends, you obviously gravitate towards people with similar personalities and similar backgrounds. But when you represent your country overseas, you don't have that liberty to say, I like you and I don't like you, and I like you a little bit more, and therefore I'll spend more time with you. You don't have that. So it's really being open to all the kinds of people you meet, speaking in English, speaking in Malay, speaking in a mix of English and Malay, sometimes Mandarin, and even the settings in which you engage. Anything from meeting people in hotel lounges over a cup of coffee in nice restaurants to like your neighborhood shop selling roti prata. They call it roti canai in Malaysia. Roti prata, roti canai at like 11 p.m. eating supper while the guy is like smoking away. You really have to be open to everything. There was in fact one time I was out of state and this person said, are you free tomorrow? Let's go horseback riding. Thankfully, the quality of our meeting was not determined by my ability to ride a horse, because that is something that like no one at MFA tells you need to know how to do before you
I'm
go
sure
overseas.
you did well. Did you stay on the horse?
On the horse didn't go very fast.
I see. Excellent. I'm glad you kept safe. I'm glad you're safe.
I'm still in one piece. But I would say that the challenging part, and this is true of almost all jobs in the civil service, but particularly in MFA, which is that you don't get to pick and choose what you want to do. And actually, while I can plan my day-to-day schedule, I can't plan for unexpected occurrences. So I can't plan when I was covering Indonesia. You can't plan for an earthquake or any kind of natural disaster that could affect a lot of your Singaporeans overseas that you have to react to. And in Malaysia, you can't plan for any kind of thing, a political event or any kind of upheaval. So it's really up to you to manage and be flexible. There's one example, not on quite such a large scale, but my friend in the US was getting married. So this is someone that I had studied with in my undergraduate. She's getting married. She came for my wedding, so I flew up to the US for her wedding. But then my foreign minister had to visit Malaysia just after. So my time in the US was 50 hours, a 48-hour flight, 50 hours in the US, came back to Singapore, no, not Singapore, to Malaysia, didn't even have time to go back to my apartment. Essentially in the arrival area in the airport, quickly changed into like working clothes, proper attire, like kind of tried to make my hair look a little bit more presentable, and then went on like a 4-day visit following my foreign minister around to 3 different parts of Malaysia. So it's really very dynamic.
The change parades I have in the army, It's like
except I didn't sign up to be in the army.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Alicia, what a trooper! I can imagine. You've overcome it. You survived this flight.
Yeah, but it's a very dynamic experience, and I think everyone else on this panel will have their own very, very different experiences to share.
Thank you for sharing. We'll come back to you again. Let me jump to Nicholas, because we also wanted to ask about how you've transited. You mentioned earlier moving from being a teacher to HQ. What was that like? And tell us about your ops and policy experiences.
Okay, sure. So I think initially, it was quite challenging at the start, adapting from school to HQ life. Because in school, the experience of working with students and seeing them learn and grow, both inside and outside of classroom, was very tangible and very rewarding. So for example, if I want to do a Kahoot quiz or group work for my lesson, I can do it straight away in class and get a good sense of their progress and learning. So as a teacher, besides the subjects I teach, I was also involved in various committees, and I was a teacher in charge of Red Cross Youth, like my CCA. So after my lessons, time will be spent on lesson preparation, consultations, marking, and setting of exams. So time management is very important, because you also want time to spend to get to know the students and also engage their parents. So I have a few students who had long-term absenteeism cases or some discipline issues that I have to deal with on top of my normal workload. So speaking to them actually opened my eyes to their stories and helped me understand their actions and why they actually did it. So I think the big questions as a teacher that you motivated me is, how do I actually motivate students who are not very motivated? Why is a student behaving like that? And how do I know that students have actually learned what I taught? And what is the exact evidence of student learning? So I think finding out these answers to these questions makes teaching very exciting. And I think the teachers who are tuning in now also agree. So I think because we come into contact with students in such a highly dynamic environment. And I think ultimately teaching is a calling, because we equip students with the skills and competencies for the future. So I'm very grateful for the mentors and colleagues who have supported me as a beginning teacher, who generously share their experiences and give feedback. So I think back to your question, I think when I started in HQ this year, I think the initial few weeks was spent reading up on various policy considerations and how this impacts the future. I think the degree of uncertainty is very high compared to being in school, where I think you have to have the mastery of your teaching subject. But in HQ, we plan ahead for the future. We plan several years ahead and project based on certain assumptions. So coming from schools actually helped me put a face to the data and statistics that I'm doing. And also the feedback comes in a different form. So instead of getting feedback from students and teachers, you get feedback from your bosses and your team. So this has helped me understand some of the constraints in schools and think deeper on what the policies have intended to achieve and whether they have actually achieved them. So I think through this, I've learned to how to adapt and learn on the job and constantly ask questions. So for example, COVID-19 has changed the face of education. I think a lot of students, parents, and teachers will agree. So similarly in HQ, I think seeing how the national policies are being formulated and contextualized to MOE, where we look after our students, before communicating it to schools is quite eye-opening. So actually, just to share, like I'm in the COVID-19 team for MOE, looking after the students who are returning from overseas and placed on stay-home notice. So putting a policy into practice in such a short time takes a lot of coordination. As Huan Ting mentioned just now, I think there's a lot of coordination to be done across the different agencies like the Immigrations and Checkpoints Authority or ICA, Ministry of Manpower, the Health Promotion Board. So I think communicating this and also sense making and with imperfect information. So while this is not something that we necessarily train for, I think like what Alicia mentioned, this is something that we rise up to the occasion and adapt accordingly. So I think that this has been a very eye-opening experience since the start of this year in HQ.
Yes, I'm sure. Do you find that interacting with students very different when you moved to HQ, where you interact with other policymakers?
Yes, definitely. I think for students, I think the concerns and issues that they face are slightly different compared to dealing with officers and colleagues in HQ. But I think either way, it's quite fun because I think knowing what the students, like what makes the students tick and understanding their concerns and help me try to prepare my lessons and also think of the values that I want to share with them has helped me become more adaptable lah. Whereas for HQ, I think the colleagues are very they are looking ahead for the future. So I think even making sense of imperfect information sometimes takes a lot of decision making and clarity when it comes to thinking.
Yes, yes. Thank you for sharing. You mentioned that it was a calling for you, and actually Joshua said the same earlier. So I have to direct this question now to Joshua and Huan Ting. You've mentioned moving about quite a bit in Army and Police. Could you flesh out what those postings are like and what students can look forward to if they joined you in service?
Okay, so I'll just go first. Since I was talking about all the different postings that we do.
Yep.
Before, usually at the start, about 10 years ago, you're first faced with a choice. What do you study, right? And you know probably what you want to do, but you're not sure what to study. And I'd say probably for the police and for the SAF, the Army and the SDF, it's pretty much anything except something that's specialist because it's really what you're interested in. And in hindsight, I can say that's true because the 4 years that you study, it's really just to develop the critical thinking. And I would recommend it's something that you feel passionate about. And if I were to make that choice, I would choose something that I was passionate about. So I'd say my master's program in science and security helped a lot, but it didn't need to be related to my work here because I'm still not using it directly. I don't do anything chemistry related, thankfully. Yeah. But then after I come back, so in the 6 years it's been since I've been back, the first 4 years are spent in ground tours. So you can call them the ops tours in the wider public service, but I guess for the uniform guys, it's by and large an ops tour in the first portion. And then I do a command tour. A command tour means, if you've watched Band of Brothers, it's Captain Spears, who's the guy leading the people into battle. If you haven't, no worries. If you think about Roman armies and legions, it's a centurion. He's in charge of about 100 men. A bit like what Hunting you're saying. And then that's the command tours where you then are responsible for the well-being and also the training of full-time national servicemen for about 2 years under you. And maybe I'd share also what it really means is you're not just leading them into exercises and training, you're also there to make an impact on the character, like what Nicholas said. So one short story is that we have people who, through the process of training, get injured, as in like sometimes ligament tears or bit lesser than that, maybe sprains, and they need to undergo rehabilitation during the period of service. And it's easy for people who are fit, then when they move out, they go through the training and they say it's super tough. They look at these guys, it's an easy life. So they tend to be outcast. And what do? Well, you still want to keep them engaged. So I gave the team in my company, the company is 120 men, those who were injured, we call them the rehab, those who needed to rehabilitate. uh, I think I gave them a project. I just told them that, you know, in our training exercises, we have people who, declared exercise casualties. You know, when you shoot, it's like laser tag, right? You get someone who's down, you need to do treatment. So I wanted to make sure that we have as few people get shot as possible. And I said that those who do get shot, record the names, that we put up a bit of it's a bit like a Kranji War memorial. So, you know, it's like, okay, I don't want my name to be there. I just told them, okay, think about it, Kranji War memorial, I'm going out for the exercise, we'll be back in 4 days. And I could tell you that they didn't need to do it, but when I came back, they went above and beyond what I said. And they didn't just put names, you know, Kranji War memorial is just names. They printed out the pictures of the people, they put there, and put like an in memory of, and they put the date. I was a bit blown away that I think when you help these people, you give them purpose, you give them a focus, they really find meaning and you make a difference in their lives, and they felt engaged, because if not, before that, they were just an outcast kind of in the company.
Yes, yes.
So that's the character development part. The policy part, I can talk a bit more, but later on it's fine, I think. So I guess Hunting's turn.
I'm sure Hunting has a lot to say also about character building to add on.
Okay. I mean, I kind of sketched out my posting history earlier in my introduction, so maybe I'll just approach this from a slightly different angle. You know, when I first signed on and got the scholarship when I was 18 years old, I signed on because I wanted to, you know, do good, fight evil, do justice, and really make a difference in the lives of people. And I thought being a police officer was a way to do that in a very direct manner, right? When you solve a case, you're helping the very victim get a sense of justice. And of course, my recruitment colleagues did a fantastic job in you know, bringing me along on raids and kicking doors and things like that. So I was like, wow, this is such an exciting career, full of adventure, never a dull day. That was really part of the reasons why I signed on. So to be completely and brutally honest, you know, I got a part of that. But as a police scholar, as a scholar, I think you are groomed for leadership positions. So you can only do that in the first couple of years of your life, which I got to enjoy. So when I started out as an investigation officer, you know, they call it the baptism of fire, because this is when you would really transit from a civilian to understanding what policing work is about. I have fond and not so fond memories of 50-hour shifts where I didn't sleep for 50 hours, and after finishing a shift, I had to go to the mortuary the next day to meet up with a next of kin of somebody who has passed away unnaturally. And after explaining to them, I had to continue without sleeping to look for a missing child who was missing for 48 hours already. And only after 50 hours I got back home. And you know, there's a kind of exciting work that we do, but it makes a difference, and I think that's all that matters at the end of the day. I think we also talked about the difference between ops posting as well as going to the ministry to do policy. Well, that's a question you posed to Nicholas earlier, and I thought I might chime in a little bit as well.
Yes,
I thought it was a great experience for me. I totally embraced it, because having served as a police officer for 7-8 years, I would say that I understood exactly how the ground works. I understood the frustrations happening on the ground. And when I got to HQ and I did my policy posting, I actually had the opportunity to change the things that I thought was not working on the ground. One interesting example I would like to raise is that as an investigation officer, we were always very befuddled by the fact that in the law, it is an offense if you insult the modesty of a woman, but it is not an offense if you insult the modesty of a man, because there's no such offense. So a man's modesty cannot be insulted. Like for example, if someone goes in the toilet and peeps at you when you're a man, right? Nothing can be done about that.
I see.
Yeah, so it was a very odd situation. And then when I went to HQ and I was involved in the review of the penal code, it was a gargantuan sort of endeavor that lasted 2 years. We had 168 recommendations at the end of it, and I think it was a 500-page report that we submitted. So a huge endeavor. And one of the things that we changed was this. We made it gender equal. A man's modesty can also be outraged. And this is one of the small examples that I like to highlight.
Thank you for sharing that example. Yeah. It's funny because in your first example and Josh's too, I always imagined you both wearing capes, the superhero capes at work. But I also wanted to push the panel discussion along and ask the four of you, well, could you make a pitch? Because I think we understand a bit more about what you do. Please make a pitch for your scholarship and your job today. What would you say to the audience?
A pitch specifically for the PSC Foreign Service Scholarship is actually get the best of both worlds, because it's in your 6-year bond, you would typically spend about 3.5 to 4 years in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, both in Singapore and overseas. And then you spend the remainder of your bond time in a different ministry. So actually, you do get a sense of both the security aspect of being in government. So in foreign service is considered security lah. And then you also get to decide decide as well as be selected to be in a different ministry. So you get a hand at understanding maybe if you want to do economic sector, social sector as well, or something else, you get an option as well. And actually, I think that combination works very well because one of the things I think about for my job is most people sign up to civil service to serve Singaporeans, right? And actually in the foreign service, you are serving Singaporeans, but you don't feel it tangibly on a daily basis necessarily, unless you really stop and think about what you're doing. I'm unlike Huan Ting and Joshua and Nicholas, I'm not really interacting with Singaporeans all the time, especially now that I'm overseas. I guess a lot of what I do actually is to ensure that the security environment that Singapore is in is safe and comfortable enough that we can actually focus a lot on our own domestic issues, our own domestic development, that we don't have to be challenged every day, day in, day out by existential threats. I mean, this is very lofty, but the reality is what we're doing is actually just pushing Singapore's place in the world so that we are safe and secure enough to spend time on internal facing issues.
Yes.
And
so, Alicia, I wanted to pause and jump in because we got a question for you. As you're talking about the demands of your job, somebody asked, well, how do you face any challenges balancing your job and also your relationships with family and friends here in Singapore? So 30 seconds, please hit us. Also, that's just one of many questions for you, Alicia. But please dedicate 30 seconds before we jump to the other speakers.
Well, COVID has all taught us that Zoom is a wonderful technology that we can all use. If you guys go overseas to study, actually, you will spend 3 or 4 years overseas. Or even if you're in Singapore and you move from home to live on campus, you'll realize that you have to use technology to interact with people. And I think our people of our generation especially are starting to get more accustomed to that. So I would say that work-life balance is, I feel very strongly about this. Work-life balance is not something you should expect your job to give you, but it's a discipline that you need to force to ensure you carve out space for yourself. So my point being that if we all sat here and, I have friends who are lawyers, I have friends who are in very competitive banking industries, no one has great work-life balance. It's really up to you to force it and to make it part of your life.
Yeah. Yes, thank you for sharing. For more questions for Alicia, please visit MFA's virtual meeting room later at the end of the day. Thanks, Alicia. Three of you. Yeah, Joshua.
Yeah, Gail. So since Alicia was talking about, I think, overseas and balancing work-life, I just wanted to chime in that we've also got quite a bit of overseas experience. Just in my own experience, I would have been in the US now if it wasn't for COVID, actually, because at the 6-year mark, we do send our scholars to go for command and staff. So I've been on a program, a 1-year master's in US, but happy to stay. And I'll be going again in 2021 if COVID improves. And but in the past 6 years, I've been to a lot of various places on either bilateral exchanges with the Bruneians or with the Americans, and then with our counterparts from Malaysia and Indonesia. So I can kind of resonate with what Alicia is saying, that you can't really be overly, you can't say I don't like you or I don't want, but it's part and parcel. And I think if I were to then just continue about if there was really a pitch, I think for all of us in this particular group, it's a calling. It's not really a career, it's a profession. And I think it's not for everyone. But if you do feel deeply about making a difference in people's lives, in making an impact, in caring about what our country means to us, our identity, what's the real fabric behind it, then this is something to consider. Because in the past 10 years that I've been, I found that I've dealt with fundamental questions. What does it mean to be Singaporean? Because that's what makes who comes into the army. And at the same time, very day-to-day issues. If you have people who struggle with finances, how do you deal with it when they're under your command? And now when it's policy, BMT, we have people who are changing, coming in from the school, who have a very different experience altogether. How do we make that continuous? So it's exciting, it's tough, but it's really fulfilling. And I think what we look for is not just fun, but fulfillment. So I'd say that's it for the army. Yeah.
Yes, it sounds really meaningful and fun at the same time, which I think is hard to balance the two. We have 5 more minutes, so I wanted to invite Nicholas and Huan Ting to share and also tie up. And then Alicia, Joshua, please feel free to jump in.
Okay, maybe I'll share. I think writing off what Joshua mentioned about the changing profile of the people who are under his command. I think indeed, I think before the people reach him, I think it goes through our doors of our schools. So I think for the students, really the profiles are changing as well. So I think for the PSC teaching scholarship, I think it provides opportunities to really understand the education system from the ground up. Because for the first few years, you will train as a teacher and be deployed in school, where you get the first-hand experience when you interact with students. So you really see the challenges that they go through, whether it's in learning or even some of the friendship issues, relationship issues that they face. And I think being a teacher, you get to shape and develop meaningful learning experiences for our students. So you're a role model for the students who see through the highs and lows with them, not just in academics, but really how they see the world. So as MOE communicates these policies, I think teachers are the ones who implement them in their classrooms. So on issues like reducing academic rigor, as in we know that as a policy, but I think the teachers are the ones who play a part in communicating it and also changing the students and the parents' mindsets. So I think if you enjoy the challenge of continually learning, then I encourage you to take on the PSC scholarship for teaching, because you get to go deep into pedagogy as a teacher, but also come to interact with the different ranges of students that our society has. And then after that, work towards understanding the policy work in MOE, and also after that, being posted to other ministries for exposure. So I think in both teaching and HQ life, I think we get a chance to make decisions in the face of uncertainty and adapt as well to the changing needs of society. But more importantly, I think communicating and seeking feedback from those I work with, be it students, parents, school leaders, are equally important. I think in the social sector, I think there's a common thread that we don't want anyone to be left behind. So I think that's why I chose to serve in the public service as well, really to serve others. And the people I serve are the students. So I think in summary, I think teaching goes beyond the teaching of the subject, but really to impact the life of our students, and not just in the classroom, but also to support them for them to be ready for the future. Yeah.
Yes. The totality of who they are beyond students, but as people.
The holistic self. Yeah.
Yes. Huan Ting, what about you?
Sure. Okay. Well, I think for most of us in the security sector, we basically want to make sure that Singapore is safe and secure. And it sounds like a cliche, but it's so important. People know Singapore is this thriving economic hub, investment center. People want to pour their money in here. Growth is phenomenal. But really at the bottom of it, underpinning economic growth is really a safe home that people feel that they can do whatever they want. There's stability. Investors trust the place and they want to come. So for me, I always say this to people that, I'm very proud of my job, because the home team together, we are working when Singaporeans are sleeping. We're working so that Singaporeans can sleep very soundly at night. And that to me is so important, giving that confidence that, no matter what happens, we've got it, we'll protect you, rest assured. So that's something I think that keeps us going. Another point I wanted to raise was sort of like tying the social and security teams together. It may seem like it's a bit odd to put the social and security people in the same session, but I just wanted to share an anecdote in my earlier career that I thought would tie them quite well together. So as a young IO, investigation officer, I was dealing with a case where there was this very young girl, I think 14, 15 years old, who kept stealing, and we arrested her and we looked at the case. And then to my horror, I found out that she was actually prostituting herself at a very young age and for money, and it was such a sad case. And then when I really dug deeper into the case, I realized that she came from a broken family. Parents were not there for her. There was some abuse happening at home, and it was a lot of social factors that came in behind her that led her to a life of crime. So then that's when we brought in the right people, the social service agencies. We brought in support structures to help her family, to help her. So yes, she committed an offense, but at the end of the day, how can we make a difference in her life so that she can change for the better? How can we support her family so that collectively as a group, they can aspire towards a better life? So I think, there's Singaporeans, they don't see you as a security sector agency. They don't see you as a social sector agency. They see you as the government, and we're all here to make a difference in their lives. So I think that's something that we're all here to do, and I hope people who want to join us in this mission will sign up as well.
Yes, Huan Ting, thank you for sharing that story. I can feel, and I'm sure the audience feels, that you are very proud of your work, and I'm sure all four of you are very proud of your work. I'm so proud of all four of you for being here. Thank you very much for this very enlightening discussion and for giving us a glimpse into your lives. I'm sure the audience enjoyed it as much as I did. Please join me in waving goodbye to them before I give the audience more logistic information for what's next. Goodbye, speakers.
Thank you, Gail, and thank you, panelists. Thank you very much for joining our virtual information session today.